Okay, let's get started. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Creating an Endowment Fund, Learning from Real-World Experience. I'm Nick Centineo, Senior Investment Consultant with Manning & Appears Endowment Foundation team, and I'm very pleased to be your moderator for today. I think this topic is timely because I think what we've seen over the past few months is kind of an increased interest in thinking a bit more about the long term. And that's not to say that organizations out there aren't inherently long-term thinkers, but I think if there is a silver lining from things like COVID and the pandemic we find ourselves in, it's that there's now a new appreciation for the benefits that a long-term endowment or foundation, or really any invested money, can bring to an organization. And we're going to be talking about those benefits today and how organizations can use them. I'd like to cast a really wide net here. There's certainly a strict definition of what endowment is and isn't, and that's fine. But I thought today's discussion could be really very general. Essentially, any investable money set aside for the long term to help your organization is fair game. So consider that restricted funds, unrestricted funds, quasi-endowment, a general fund. That's all fair game. And then the other thing worth mentioning, I think there's probably people in our audience whose organization has zero invested money. I'm sure there's also some in our audience who already have a formal endowment or a foundation, and maybe you're just looking to grow it. We want to speak to both of you today. So the startups and the established players, by learning as much as we can from the experience that our guests bring to us today. And so we are very lucky to have two esteemed leaders with us, representing both the Rochester area and Central Ohio. So please welcome them with me. We have Joel Elliott, Director of Development, who brings the spirit of creativity and innovation to St. Joseph's Neighborhood Center, a safety net healthcare facility serving Rochester, New York, and surrounding areas. St. Joe's is a small shop with big dreams to provide comprehensive integrated healthcare to uninsured and underinsured persons. And before coming to the Neighborhood Center in 2017, Joel served stints in development at the Jewish Federation of Greater Rochester and as Executive Director of Temple B'rith Kodesh in Brighton. And prior to this move to mission-driven organizations, he worked for 19 years at AAA. A lifelong learner, Joel attended the University of Chicago in the 1970s, studying philosophy, Monroe Community College in the 1980s, studying accounting, and Gratz College more recently, where he filled in the gaps. And then we also have Chuck Gearing, who is President and Chief Executive Officer of Life Care Alliance, which was founded in 1898 and is one of Central Ohio's oldest and largest nonprofit organizations. Its mission is to provide health and nutrition services to those in need, and they serve over 30,000 clients, 98% of which have incomes below the federal poverty level. And Chuck initiated an endowment campaign to help secure the future for Life Care Alliance. There is a $5 million match for endowment gifts with a goal to establish a $20 million endowment by 2025, and the goal was reached this year. Chuck spent many years as an adjunct professor with Franklin University. He was the Chief Financial Officer, Treasurer, and Vice President of the Dining Services Division at Sanese Services. And he also spent 10 years with Anheuser-Busch, serving in financial and operation management positions. Chuck earned a master's degree in business administration from Xavier University, a bachelor's degree from The Ohio State University, is a graduate of St. Charles Preparatory High School, and has served on numerous volunteer boards and committees. So just a few housekeeping items before we get started. If you have any questions, feel free to submit them throughout the webinar using Zoom's question box. When we conclude today's prepared questions, we'll spend any remaining time answering questions that have been submitted. And if we run short on time and are unable to answer your questions, we will personally follow up with you after the webinar. And then also for your convenience, a recording of this webinar will also be available for replay. Okay, that's it. I think we're ready to get started. Gentlemen, first off, thank you so much for joining us today. On our agenda, we wanted to cover three main areas. So we wanted to cover the role of endowed funds at your organizations, getting started, and then also the lessons that you've learned that you would like to pass on to our listeners. So why don't we start with the role of endowed funds? So I think this is a really good starter question because it gives you a chance to talk a little bit more about your organizations and how they use endowed funds, what benefits they see provided with them. And I'd also like you to be frank and if you see any disadvantages with them. So Chuck, let me throw this question to you first. What do you tell us a little bit more about your endowed funds and how your organization sees them?
Well, endowed funds for us are incredibly important. We didn't have any when I got here. I've been here about almost 19 and a half years now. And we had about $250,000 in a little fund at the Columbus Foundation. That was an endowed fund, I guess. But other than that, we had about a month and a half or so of operating income in our money market and our checking account, which was very scary for an agency of this size. I'm a big believer. I was a for-profit guy, as you just heard in the introductions, for about 20 years. I'm a big believer in endowed funds. They provide you with all kinds of safety net and security. Now, we do not have enough to run this agency with on our budget, but it's enough to allow us to take everybody in need. We have a very low income group for the most part that we service. And we feel we really want to take everybody in need. And in the top 50 markets, population-wise right now nationally, we're told that our Meals on Wheels program, which is one of the largest in the country, we're probably one of the very, very, very few still taking clients. And with COVID, just to give you an idea, we shot up 65% the number of Meals on Wheels we're delivering. Just one of the things we do. And, we had to have a safety net. Endowed funds are just critical for all those kinds of things. And if you're ever doing mergers with other agencies, we've taken on now 5 other agencies. We've got 2 of them about halfway endowed. And that will allow them to go on for years and years to come. And an endowment also gives people something to look at and shoot for. We have a lot of recognition programs here for the endowment. We have different societies. Our main endowment society is called the Catherine Nelson Black Fund, or the Catherine Nelson Black Society. She was our founder in 1898. And people like to set up, if you have an endowment, people like to set up a fund that they can donate to. So maybe they set up the initial fund with an initial contribution, but then over the years, they will continue. Has been our history here. They continue to give to that fund because it's in their name. And it's really been a big boon to the agency. And like I said, a big safety net to our agency going forward.
Joel, what do you think about, and tell us a little bit about your experience as well.
Sure. St. Joseph's Neighborhood Center is a comprehensive healthcare facility that provides medical, dental, and mental health care for the uninsured and underinsured. And we don't accept Medicare, Medicaid, or private insurance. So we are completely dependent on the generosity of the community and also the small fees, $10 and $20, that we respectfully request from our patients and clients. So we, for the 30 years of our existence, have been at a point where we're constantly going back to the community and looking for support from individuals, from health-related foundations, and also trying to make payroll. Yeah. Interestingly enough, during this pandemic time, because people know that we're a safety net for the community, and during this COVID time when more and more people don't have company-sponsored healthcare insurance any longer, folks have come forward, and all of a sudden we're running ahead of our operating budget for the first time probably in the whole 30 years. So this is a perfect opportunity for us to say, hey, maybe we need to look at invested funds. Maybe we need to look at an endowment so that as capacity needs grow, we can also have that safety net. I'm going to be jumping back and forth, Nick, between that and Temple Brith Kodesh. TBK was founded 170 years ago. Their endowment fund was set up about 50 years ago, but was very small. And as the congregation ages, like many faith organizations are aging and their membership is shrinking, folks took a hard look at it and said, we need to set up a separate foundation that supports the congregation. And so about 10 years ago, I was part of that, setting up the Temple Brith Kodesh Foundation. And that way there were separate trustees and separate mission to help us create a fund that grows, just like Chuck's Alliance Fund has grown over the past few years. So those are the two organizations I'll be talking about in my experience. One where I work currently, ready to go, and maybe for the first time with some funds to do it. And the other one ready to continue sustaining toward the future with a separate foundation.
So maybe this is a misconception, but I mean, it sounds like a lot of work to get something established. It sounds like a lot of legwork initially and maybe something that pays off years later. Do you think that's true? Or do you think there are any other disadvantages to having like this longer term pool of assets in place? Either Chuck or Joel.
Let me jump in first. If you're talking about the discipline of setting some funds aside and not touching them for the future, it takes less work and more determination. And it takes the resources, and it takes being able to talk to people and talk to them knowledgeably about what the purpose is for that. Setting up that separate 501c3 foundation, it was a lot of paperwork, and it was coming together an organizational understanding of the direction we wanted to go, but definitely worth it, because we could go to a donor and say, this foundation is a forever foundation, and we would like our organization to be a forever organization, as long as it's doing good in the community. So I would say not hard, it just takes discipline and determination. And I'd love Chuck's feelings about that.
Well, I agree, Joel. I see no disadvantages to having an endowment, but let me comment on a couple of things that you listening to this webinar today might feel is a little bit of a disadvantage. You are the development leader for your organization, or you're the CEO, executive director for the organization. You're going to spend time on this. It's just the way it's got to happen. We were blessed to be able to promote somebody from within who was going to run this campaign for us. But I can tell you, she also kept her old job, many of her old functions. If someone is going to give you a large gift to an endowment and set up a fund, they're going to want to hear the vision of the organization. That means the CEO. And they're going to want to meet with that person and find out all those things. So you're going to spend a significant amount of time getting this going. But, you know, we didn't do cold calling in this. It was all our existing donors. You know, the experts tell you that the best people leave you an estate gift, for example, are the people that give you $50 or $100 per year, but they do it every single year. We found that to be the case. And what we had to do was move some people from estate giving when they pass away to do it now. And, you know, one of the things we did was just try to encourage people that, you know, if you give the gifts now, you get this tremendous tax benefit from them. When you passed away, sometimes the tax benefits aren't as great because you don't have the runway. So we've had very fortunate success here. It's work. There's no question. It's work. But I will tell you that it pays off in the end. And the other thing we did before we had our endowment campaign, we started taking anything we got as an estate gift and putting it in this endowment we set up. So even if the people, and I would tell you 98% of the estate gifts we got through wills and trusts, it just said it comes to the agency. It didn't say what it was for, or it would say possibly for one of our program areas. Well, we needed money everywhere. It didn't really matter. So, you know, we would religiously and with great discipline put that money away. We had to live without that money in our operating budget, and that's what you have to do. And I've seen, unfortunately, some agencies, including a couple that have merged into us, spend estate gifts, and that is just that's just difficult. If you can save them, put them aside for the future, run your agency on the budget that you have, then then it will start building. And because the market's been so good over the last many years, it's just amazing. I would tell you, in 2019 alone, we made $1.8 million in interest and dividends and accumulated earnings on our investments, which were at that time only about $12 million. It's amazing what can happen for doing basically nothing. So that was a wonderful, wonderful thing. And, you know, it's a great thing for your organization. I don't see a lot of downsides. I think everybody should try at least to start an endowment.
Miracle of compound interest, right?
Yes. Yes.
I think that is a really good segue into getting started. I think we have some organizations out there in our audience who are looking for concrete steps, you know, to get started. But what would you think are, I mean, you've already talked a little bit about your experiences in getting things started, getting the ball rolling. I'd like to hear more if you can fill in any blanks there, or if there's any real concrete first few steps that you'd like our audience to learn about to how to get started.
Well, I'll jump in first this
Sure.
time. And I would say there's a couple that I want to mention. There are concrete steps. First of all, if you hire a consultant to help you with a campaign, they're all going to tell you the same thing. You have to start talking about estate gifts and endowment gifts in every piece of material you ever send out to any donor. And many agencies don't do that. They'll tell you that every news, and we did this, and it really, I thought, got the conversation going. In every newsletter, every piece of mail that we sent out, and we still do quite a bit of direct mail here. We don't bombard people with it, but we send out a couple pieces every year. Everything, every piece of material had talked about endowments, and that you could have a fund and you could set something up for the future of the agency. And in fact, we had on our bounce back envelopes that were in like our annual report and things like that, there was actually a line on the bounce back card after the boxes that you checked for the different programs you wanted to give your money to here. We have a number of different programs. There was a box that said, hey, I want to learn more about the endowment or about long-term or planned giving. And it was a quickie, easy box to check. And we did get some of those. So that was very important. So I think your materials are the way to go. And then secondly, if you have some regular donors who fit the national standards for doing estate gifts or things like that, you got to go see them quickly and kind of do it by age. I hate to sound like a vulture here, but you have to do it by age. So, I mean, we started with the 90-year-olds and and we've had people here, just so you know, volunteering in our programs for as much as 30, 40 years sometimes. So we tried to go to those people, took them out to lunch, went to their house, whatever it might be, and said, hey, you've been a wonderful, wonderful supporter of this agency for all these years, these decades that you've been supporting us. Can't thank you enough. Are we in your will? Have you ever thought about putting us in your will? And I will tell you, I have never had anybody get mad at me for asking that question. You don't have to be so pushy. You know, you're not sitting there with them and saying, well, I need an estate gift of $50,000. That's not the point. But you know, I've never had anybody that wasn't open to this and didn't want to hear more about it from us. So those are a couple of the early steps. And I think you'll find you'll start getting people to send you things specifically for the endowment, and then you're off and running.
Joel, what do you think?
I would agree with everything Chuck has said, and I would even add, you haven't started your endowment yet. You haven't gotten to that point in your organization, and you've been spending the bequests that you get because you need to do that to stay open. See if you can take a portion, 50% of those bequests, and push them aside for an investment fund, for an endowment. We don't have an endowment at St. Joseph's Neighborhood Center, and yet, just like Life Care Alliance, every direct mail piece that we send out, and we also do that twice a year, and every email blast that we send out has, have you remembered us in your will? Would you like more information about a life gift, about a major gift? Can we call you? Can you call us? So we have those check boxes, even though we haven't matured to the point where we have an endowment. We do have a evergreen society, which is maybe the first step. And what we're trying to do as we grow that, and people call and say, hey, I put you in my will and you didn't call me or ask me about it yet. Well, we have to get better at that. But what we're trying to do is also bring that group together. It's another group of volunteers, another group of supporters, and do an event every year. We were scheduling a nice summertime picnic for them this summer, but of course, we did a Zoom call instead.
Yeah.
And they could bring their own picnic.
Good idea still, I think. I know holding events like that is always tough, but
well, Nick, I would just tell you too, if I can just jump in real quick.
Yeah.
We do a lot of events for our Catherine Nelson Black Society members. Now, some of them have passed away, but then you can invite relatives or kids. But we do a number of events around here. We have space to do it, and we own a catering company, believe it or not, that is social enterprise for us, so we can make the food and things like that. But we do a lot of events for people, and people show up. They want to hear, they want to be included. And we always tell them we're going to give them backroom information on the agency when they come. And we always try to tell them things that nobody else knows. So those things are very important to keep your societies and your people engaged.
Yeah, keeping top of mind for sure. What was your experience in terms of how to structure your funds? I mean, we can get into like technical details here about how the legal structure should be set up, but I'm also interested in how you might track all these different funds, because I think that's something that can scare away a lot of people. Whether you outsource that, whether it's just as simple as a spreadsheet, your experience in some of the logistics of structuring and tracking things, I think would be helpful. Joel, can we start with you?
Sure. At the synagogue, we did use QuickBooks and Excel spreadsheets to keep track of the restrictions in our endowment fund. And then when we went to a separate foundation, it was the same QuickBooks and the same Excel spreadsheets, but we put an additional layer in place that helped the organization. And I'll talk about it very quickly. Separate foundation, separate 501c3, separate board of directors, although that board of trustees was selected by the leadership of the organization, and a single member. In other words, the foundation had only one member, and that was the synagogue, that was the congregation. So they could only be there to support the congregation. The reason why we did the separation is because our board of trustees at the congregation had to worry about day-to-day operations and about programs and about the congregants' needs. And we wanted a separate group to focus on the longer term needs, and also the givers that wanted to support in that way, whether it was a life gift, a major gift, a bequest. So that's how we set that up. How we set it up as we move forward here at St. Joseph's Neighborhood Center, I think the first step would be to gather together our board leadership and have a separate mission statement for the endowment or for an endowed fund, so that there's some clarity for the giver, because it's always, the giver is king, queen, prince, and princess, right? So yeah, that's how we're just starting out, but in a more mature situation, that's what we found to be helpful.
Well, I agree with Joel again, and but here's something. We are examining setting up a separate foundation, because we're getting into the point we have a lot of money and we have buildings. We own 3 buildings. So from a legal standpoint, it's not bad to put those in a separate foundation, just as Joel described, because then they can't, somebody suing you for your programs. We did approximately 3 million in-home visits last year from this agency, either delivering a meal, sending a nurse out, a homemaker, a home health aide, whatever it might be. Things can happen. Hopefully they don't, knock on wood, but so you protect your assets. But I would tell you, our foundation is still with us. We're managing it. Our finance committee is watching over it. We have some financial professionals on there. who help us with our investments. But to keep track of some of these investments, the first thing you can do is engage your investment company. And I don't know, it could be someone like, Manning and Napier, and you ask them to assist you in how you define where the money is. They can help you with their statements. We have one group here. We actually are up to the point now. We have 3 different investment companies investing endowment funds for us. And the finance committee wanted to do that to kind of have them bounce off each other. But one group we have here has multiple funds because they have multiple areas that people like to give money to. And frankly, they were a merger agency and they came with some funds. So those investment professionals actually detail it on the statement. There's different funds and things, and that'll help you. But the bottom line is some of it you're going to just have to do yourself. I mean, I've been for 19 years pretty much the accountant, which is my undergrad background. I've been the accountant on this stuff, and we just watch over it and make sure that we have it properly structured. And you're going to have these funds for your auditors. And each year I would suggest to you, tell your auditors the different funds that came in and what they're for. So let's say in your organization, you have 3 program areas and a fund and an amount comes in for program area C. Well, tell your auditors about that because that sort of restricts it to program area C. They might put that in your audit for you. And there's some great information in your audit to be able to assist you with that. But some of it is just keeping track of it, letting people know what's going on. And you do want to we also have a couple of groups here of volunteers who have set up funds over the years who want to know how their fund is doing. We have 2 situations only 2 situations out of literally a couple thousand gifts, but we have 2 situations where they want to have a say into where the interest on their fund goes every year, 5% throw off from their fund. So we have to keep them a little bit separate, just to be able to tell them that. And if they're a larger donor, you may want to do that, but that will come naturally based on what you get. But for the average gift, they're going to come unrestricted. You can kind of plow them all together and get them invested, and off you go.
Let me jump in with one more quick thing.
Yep.
So Life Care Alliance provides about 3 million services per year. St. Joe's about 15,000 patient and client visits per year. So you can see that the organization's one very large and very important throughout the community, and one small and filling a safety net niche. Both have similar things to consider in setting up an endowment. And again, one thing that maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit, Nick, that I would say is your investment advisor, I don't know, someone like Manning and Napier, could help you with some very important things to get started. A gift acceptance policy. And you want to be really clear. Sometimes one has to turn down a gift because it just doesn't fit with the mission of the organization. A spending policy. How are we going to distribute funds? Chuck talked about those supporting foundations that still have control over the interest or the income that's earned. That's something that an investment advisor can help with because it happens all the time in the philanthropic world. And then investment parameters, of course, just like any investable fund, you would want to set guidelines, your appetite for risk, your need for cash being thrown off by the fund. So I would just say that those are areas, whether you're very small and just starting out, or you've had a successful endowment campaign and you are thinking about setting up a separate foundation, those things are the same for all.
Yeah, and I would add, that's great, Joel. And I would add that on the gift acceptance policy, if you've never done one of those, it's just general, but it says that we set up that our executive committee of our board would vote on any unusual gifts. Okay. And by unusual gifts, I mean things like, hey, I'm going to give you a hunk of land I own in Colorado. Well, we don't know about that. Or if there's a hunk of land that has gas tanks buried on it, you got to be careful with that. I was once offered a jet ski on a trailer, which I thanked the person for tremendously. But I said, if I take that, it's probably going to be stolen off our parking lot within the next 2 days. So you got to know those types of things. But I think both of us, Joel and I, were talking earlier, we've both been given a house I've been given a couple of low price condos, and you've got to know if you want to do those things. There's art, there's all kinds of things that can be donated. And the more that you can take, the better off you're going to be. But then you have to go through the sales process and get it, sold and things. So those are all fun things that come down the line. But I would tell you they're kind of fun. I had a lady who gave us this year a gift of about $240,000, and she also gave us her silverware. Now, this is a box that shows up in my office from the attorney with beautiful silverware in it, but it had been well used. Some of it was day silverware and some of it was sterling. To make a long story short, I knew an auction guy. We went through the process. We got a check for $1,400 for the silverware, and that's why she gave it to us. And so,
Wow.
but we knew we would accept that. We had a way to make it go away, and she didn't expect us to keep it and use it every day. But what a lovely gift that she gave us her silverware set. None of her family members wanted it, and another $1,400 for us. So
We could probably do a separate webinar on selling things like jet skis and antiques and other strange gifts like that.
Yeah, if we do a separate one, I'll tell you about the Dutch master we received and about all of the different vacation properties that people wanted to give us.
Yeah. Well, if you can sell it, then it's worth something.
Exactly.
Now, how do you cultivate planned gifts? Because that's part and parcel with building something long term, right? Like to make a big difference, you have to go after the big gifts, the big estate and planned gifts. So I know we've already talked about a little bit, but I was wondering if you could each talk a little bit more about your philosophies when it comes to planned gifts.
I'll jump in. And the key takeaways are on the bottom of the screen right there. So please write those down. We did a capital campaign a few years before we started an endowment campaign, and we had a consultant for that, which is something you want to have in Central Ohio. It's just the way it works. And she's been super. Lori Overmeyer, Gettler and Associates here in town. And if you ever need somebody, I would recommend them highly. She tells us that some of the national stats are, hey, you don't ask day one, you got to build this up. That really with somebody new who's a donor, you really want to meet with them probably 3-4 times. That the average nationally to touch a donor is 7 times a year, which can be mailers, whatever it is. You don't make ask on day one, but you start telling them the compelling stories, as it says there, and really listening to them. The key is to listen and talk less and find out what their life is like and what their hot buttons are. I can't tell you how much information we have typed into our system or in handwritten form in our files on what the dog's name is, where the kids live, you've got to know that stuff. And when you go out, build that relationship, I would tell you, this is not disingenuous on my part. I love hearing stories from these folks. And when you go out to an elderly person's home, they're going to show you their stuff. They're going to tell you about their life. And I really love that kind of stuff. I love it, but you may spend 3-4 hours in that person's house. And, but that builds that relationship. For our match donor who matched $5 million of our endowment program, that was a 12-year relationship building process. 12 years, he and me. It's a gentleman. He's a little older than me, and we go out to dinner, we drink wine, we go to lunch, I love going to his house. I just love the man. I've become personal friends with this guy. I mean, I really have. But understand too, there have been some court cases in the country. There was one at a college I think it was in Vermont, where the president of the college was picking up this elderly woman and bringing her to the basketball games of the college because she loved their basketball games. Well, when she passed away, the kids sued the college because she had left the college money, and they thought he coerced the person into doing it. So you got to be a little careful there. But I can tell you, I've become personal friends with some of these people, and they're just wonderful. And it's something that you're going to have to do for these major gifts. They want to know what you're doing, who you are, whether they're going to give to you or not. They're trusting you. People give to people is the old saying, and they are trusting you with their money. But it's one of the most fun things I do. It's the most fun part of my job is meeting these people, hearing about, you can't believe some of the stories I've been told over the years, and they're just wonderful. And we love them, and the Giving Society is very important, et cetera, et cetera. And the history of our organization is the last point there, says we're 122 years old. My assistant here has categorized all that historical stuff, and we've got a lot of stuff. Somebody had a brain in 1900 and threw the pictures in a box. People love that. And it's very important that you build, it's relationship building. And I think a lot of people lose that. They just go out and immediately ask for the gift. That's not a good thing. You got to build that relationship and move it ahead from there. So you start with your longest term people, and you'll find there's great acceptance among them. Go ahead, Joel.
Thank you. You know, a mentor said to me once something that I'm sure many people on this call have heard, and that's 2 ears, 1 mouth. So you should listen twice as much as you talk. In this setting, I guess all we can do is talk, because there are folks out there that are listening. But I hope folks, if they have specific questions or want to continue the conversation, will get in touch with me after the hour is up. I would also say that for the professional fundraisers and anyone that's a CEO or an executive director or manages a program, is also doing development work, doing fundraising development. It's just part of the job. But if you're a full-time development officer, in my opinion, stewardship and cultivation and asking for gifts are all the same thing. It's all telling the story and listening carefully and taking a donor's passion, a philanthropist's passion, and turning that into something that forwards the mission of your organization. So that's sort of fundraising 101 from the way I look at it, but it's really easy to say it. It takes 60 seconds. It's really much more difficult to live it. So I would just say, build relationships, just as Chuck has said, have fun with it. Realize that at a certain point, if you're doing development with a big chunk of your day, all of your friends and acquaintances are also going to be donors. It just sort of turns out that way. Yeah. And it's a little bit of a sacrifice, but it's also such a wonderful gift.
Yeah, really, really good sound bites from both of you guys. I love the one you gave, Joel. But moving on to lessons learned, because I think this is a really good way to wrap things up, and also a really good way to ask you a little bit more about what is happening more currently, especially with the pandemic and all the challenges a lot of organizations are facing. But tell us about what challenges you might be facing and how an endowment or a foundation, an invested pool of money might have already helped that, or might help that situation in the future. Chuck, can you start for us?
Sorry, I just put my hand up and say, Joel, go ahead and take this.
It doesn't matter anyway.
Our challenge is I think I mentioned this, our Meals on Wheels have shot up 65% and have never come down. Our pantry, which is cancer specific and AIDS specific, you have to have active cancer, active AIDS users, shot up 52%, hasn't come down. You cannot believe the amount of goods we have in our buildings right now to help out our clients. So the fact of the matter is we've been blessed with some CARES Act money and some local support, a lot of local support, which is very key. But endowment or foundation provides you with your backstop for times like this. And there's going to be another pandemic. There's going to be another downturn in the economy, whatever it might be. And the endowment provides you with a little safety net. We had one thing we had to upgrade a mammography. We have a mammography unit in our building, believe it or not, for our Columbus Cancer Clinic. And it needed to be upgraded for $250,000. So we started raising money to upgrade that unit, and COVID hit. Nobody wanted to give us money anymore to upgrade that unit. If they were going to give us money, they all wanted to give us the money to help us with our COVID relief, because we had so many more clients that were coming in here to help. So that just hit that was a quick stop there. So what we were able to do is we had a very long-term endowment for that group, and we were able to take $100,000 out of that endowment in interest this year. They could have taken a lot more, but we took $100,000 to upgrade that unit, which was very important from a Medicare, Medicaid billing standpoint, from an insurance billing standpoint, and just for the health and safety and care of the clients. So that's one specific story that really helped us this year. And if we didn't have that endowment, we wouldn't have upgraded that unit, and that would have cut the number of people coming here. It just would have been a problem. The enhancement we upgraded to was to get a better view of what they were taking the mammography of, and that's important to find cancer lumps. So as we know, it was a very practical example this year. Joel.
Yeah, thank you. I'm actually, Chuck, glad that you went first, because I want to say that when the pandemic started and we locked our front door on March 13th, we didn't stop operating. We had people come in by appointment. 11 of our doctors and nurse practitioners called 900 patients to see how they were doing. And what we heard over and over again, and remember, this is early on in the pandemic in March, people were concerned about food. They were concerned. That was the big health need. How are they going to get food? The secondary need was, I'm afraid to go to the hospital. So we had to encourage people who were having a heart attack or a stroke to actually go to the emergency department, because they still could get excellent care there and not at home. But when it comes right down to it, we pivoted and started working with the Meals on Wheels people and FoodLink, our most excellent food stability organization in Rochester, to make sure that people were getting the food that they needed so they could stay healthy. That's not our primary service that we provide, but it's important. The other thing that I wanted to say to everyone is just this. 2020, for an organization that provides healthcare, that provides mammographies, that provides Meals on Wheels, we're going to be fine in 2020 because of the payroll protection program, because community has stepped forward with crisis funding. 2021 is going to be tougher. And that's where an endowment, where invested funds, where a savings account like that can really, really help. Right now, everyone is stepping forward with their resources. And if they have dollars to give, people gave us their $1,200 when they received it. Thank God I don't need this. Why don't you take it and use it for people that are struggling with COVID-19 or struggling with their health needs? But next year, that's going to be where something like an endowment or a separate foundation can really make a difference.
That's a good segue into our last question, I think, also, because we want to pass on lessons about everything you've learned in your experience. And I mean, I guess that is the question. That's a good closing question. What is the most important thing, or some things that you would like to pass on, and learning from the difficulties of years like 2020, or maybe the startup years, when you were first thinking about how to start your foundation or endowment? Is there anything that you do differently given your experience there? And Joel, I think it's your turn to start with that question. So I'll give you the hard question to start with.
What would I do differently? I would jump in sooner, both at the organization that had an endowment fund, but it had been languishing a little bit, and at the current organization that is ripe to start an endowment fund. You might wonder, gosh, what do I need to get started? Well, if you have a small organization and you can figure out a way to put aside $25,000 or $50,000, do it. Because with the magic of investment growth and compound interest, that will grow. But you can't start unless you start. And I think sometimes even I, who has worked as a professional fundraiser, who realizes the generosity of individuals in the community, even I sometimes hesitate. Well, maybe it's not the right time. I'm feeling a little bit, I think I have a sniffle coming on. You just have to get past all that and jump.
Well said. And I'm going to just ditto that. Here's my side of it, depending on how big your organization is too. You've got to, you're going to do, when I started here, I was doing all the work on endowment. I was the endowment guy in addition to running the agency. You've got to get to the point with your board to commit that they're going to hire somebody that's going to help with these calls, at least the initial calls and things like that, because I want to start sooner too. That's my thing. I would have hired more staff earlier on. I could have afforded them. I should have got them in here and got rolling. And I did too much myself, and I couldn't get to everybody. I couldn't set up everything. So, you know, you got to talk to your board about this, really get their buy-in and say, you know, and I've heard a lot of boards over the years, and we've taken on some of these agencies. I've heard these boards say this: we can't afford another advancement person. We can't afford that person. Well, you can't afford not to have that person. It's going to take an outlay of money up front. And if you're a small organization, you may not have that outlay of money up front. So, you know, but at least, like Joel said, just start, just get rolling, and you'll be amazed what happens. But you can, like I said, put this message in every piece of mail, every material you put out on your website, et cetera, and you just start getting it in people's minds, because a lot of agencies, frankly, have not started on this process. And so you can have a little bit of a leadership role in that whole thing. Okay.
Yeah, this is great information, guys. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. It's really valuable input. So I just want to say thank you first and foremost. But I also want to share the contact information for Life Care and St. Joseph's. So again, that's Life Care Alliance and St. Joseph's Neighborhood Center. I've gotten to know both your organizations recently. I can tell you both are tremendous resources for people in their community. Definitely worthy of your support. So if all of you all in the audience get a chance, check out their websites, reach out to Chuck and Joel to learn more. Definitely two worthy organizations. So thank you for jumping on the call. And then, of course, feel free to reach out to us at Manning the Peer. You can learn more about the services that we provide to our clients. You can download our latest nonprofit magazine called Impact, or you can join our mailing list. We're always trying to put out helpful content, both on the investment side, but then also on the nonprofit side like this. And you can sign up for all that content. Go to manning-napier.com/sign up. So we've already got a bunch of good questions coming in. I'd like to go through them. One that was pre-submitted that I think is really good for either of you. What's a reasonable minimum for a named endowment fund? And so this person says, we currently use $10,000. We are a small agency with an annual budget of $4.5 million. So in your experience, is there a good minimum to set for a named endowment fund?
Well, to name the fund is to respect the donor. I don't know that there needs to be a minimum for a small agency with a $4.5 million budget. It all depends on what sort of gifts you're getting from individuals. If someone's really serious about endowment and they give a $500 annual gift and they would like that $500 gift to continue in perpetuity, I would say that they should consider a $10,000 gift. But if they gave a $5,000 gift, I would accept that gratefully, as long as they don't want to control the way that those dollars are spent. You know, there are tax implications of that, but really what it comes down to is relationship building. If the gift is given and it's given with minimum restriction, why not give them the honor, the covet of naming?
Yeah.
And I learned that from my esteemed colleague just as we revved up to do the presentation. So,
yeah.
My esteemed colleague said everything correctly there. Most organizations are going to want to set some baseline. So the ones I've seen over the years are 10,000 and 25,000. Those are the two biggies, unless you're doing an endowed scholarship fund at a college or something like that. Those are good, but here's the issue. You got to get to some other people that maybe can't. They would like to have a named fund. They'd like to be in the annual report with a named fund. They'd like to be able to tell their relatives to contribute to their fund. but they don't have $10,000 to start. This is up to your organization, but I'm big on letting them start as long as they say, hey, I'm going to keep contributing to this. So we've had a number of people start funds here with $1,000. I'll just be honest with you, $1,000, $1,000. But they said, hey, I'm going to send you $1,000 every year to put in my fund. And they've been very good about it. So it builds up. And also if you have younger people that might be your donors. So my high school, I went to a Catholic private high school here in Columbus, Ohio, and I've been on their board for like the last 85 years, it seems like. But the point is we have people that come out of college. They're right out of college. Some of these people have pretty good jobs and they have the ability to send you $250 or $500. Well, if they don't get to do that, you won't capture them for the future. So that when they're 45 or 55 years old, they give you the big gift. And again, that's what the experts say nationally. I'm not that smart to know all this stuff, but I read a lot. And I really have found over the years that that's very true. You let them get started and they build it up.
The other thing I would add, I worked with a real estate developer, such a generous man. He and his wife donated to their fund, their named fund every year. And his goal was to get the fund to $1 million. And sadly, in his lifetime, that did not happen. He was getting close. It was, I think, about $350,000 when he passed away. But through a bequest, it grew to over $1 million. And so that named fund, which is managed with some input from his children and his grandchildren, really, he achieved his goal. He wasn't able to do it during his lifetime.
And just real quick on that, that's a fabulous point, Joel. Just real quick, if you have a donor who's a longtime donor, volunteer at your organization, and they lose a spouse, it's a great time, not at the funeral, but it's a great time in a few months down the road to contact them and say, you've been a great donor for years. Would you like to set up a named fund, maybe in your name or in the name of your spouse who passed away? I have found they jump on that like craziness, and then the person keeps sending money. I've got one who lost his wife, and a longtime donor. I talked to him about it. First year, he sent $5,000 to set up the fund. In the past about 7 years, we've gotten over $130,000 from this gentleman alone. And the fund's named only in his wife's name. He just wants it in his wife's name. I mean, what a great tribute. Yeah. Somebody in your family. So, or a kid can be the same situation, a child that's lost. So I hate to be a vulture again, that we're doing this with somebody who lost a relative, but it is something that people seem to want to do.
Tribute and legacy are valuable to many people, I think. Now here's a really good question that came in. It says, one organization I am involved with has concerns that it will be difficult to raise money if donors see that the organization already has millions on its balance sheet. How do you address that concern?
I have found that people who contribute to you tend to be people of a higher net worth, as we know, and they appreciate the fact that you have a balance sheet that's going to continue. I have found that people don't want to continue to contribute to lost causes. We've had a couple of situations, I know, in Central Ohio the past few years, where somebody is really, an agency's really on the brink of disaster, going out of business, and they run some campaign to keep them, to raise money to keep them in business. People are not thrilled about that. They might give, but they're not thrilled about that. The people look at your balance sheet and say, hey, you've got some money. You have to explain it to them. Here's why we have this money. And you also tell them that a lot of the money on the balance sheet is endowed, which means we can't touch it. And we have gone to great lengths to make sure that my successors cannot touch the money that's been raised around here. So they appreciate that, and they feel that your agency has more depth and breadth to it, and it will go on longer. So people want to help a winner. Let's face facts. There's going to be a lot of people running around the United States now with Dodger hats on because they just won the World Series. I mean, it's people like to support a winner, and that's a very important thing, I think.
I usually wear a Cubs hat, so I guess I support a loser. But I do want to say that another important thing to remember is you receive a gift in the way that it is offered. And so if someone has been a volunteer at your organization and they've been volunteering for 25 years and they've been annual donors for 25 years as well, and they would like to make a gift that is endowed, that means they want the corpus, the $10,000 that they donate, to throw off $500 of income so that their gift can continue. So if a donor says, well, you got millions in the bank, well, those millions in the bank were donated so that 5% or 6% or whatever spending policy your organization develops, so that those dollars can be used 50 years from now, 100 years from now. So it's respecting the way a gift was given.
Yeah. I think we have time for one more question, which I also think is a really good one here. Let me read it. How do you build agency and ownership within your donors, as often is the case with NPOs, if the donors are usually not the service recipients, like unlike hospitals or universities? And because both of you work for healthcare organizations and other organizations that serve the needy, I think this is a great one for you guys to tackle.
Thank you. I'll go first. Well, our best donors are our volunteers. So the doctors, nurses, dentists, hygienists, therapists, counselors that come here, and then all the others of us who are not licensed. And so they, I think, are invested and feel some agency because they're actually providing the care. We do have some patients that have come back and said, you know, I was having a hard time for a while, and now I have company sponsored health insurance and I'm in much better shape. For those, we try and capture those stories. We don't expect them to be the $1 million donors, but boy, do they inspire a $1 million donor. And that's another way to build agency. It's really easy to see yourself in somebody else's shoes. It could be any of us.
Our clients are for sure not our donors. Our clients don't have the money to be our donors for the most part. So what we do is try to put our donors and our clients somehow together. So the other day we've always had like a monthly, it's called Lunch with Chuck. And basically we'd host people for lunch, give them a tour and stuff. Well, now it's virtual Lunch with Chuck. And the other day we had one of these, and we actually had, through the magic of Zoom, one of our clients on the call, and we had her speak. And the donors on the call listened to her as to why her services from us were so critical to her. We don't even have to tell them what to say. Trust me, you don't have to tell your clients what to say. They will say, you know, a favorite expression of our clients is, well, if I didn't get the Meals on Wheels from Life Care Alliance, I'd probably die. I mean, that's what they say. And so that helps out tremendously. And we also offer them, we have a client area in one of our buildings. It's a dining center. And so there's clients in there every day at lunch. We bring them in, things like that. We try to get donors to come down when there's no COVID to see those people and just see what's in there and see who's in there and talk to a couple of them, things like that. Oh my gosh, that's just, that's wonderful. And the other thing is donors want to help out those less fortunate. And right now we're hearing a lot from our donors that we want to help basic needs. Basic needs is the big thing, obviously, but they want to meet those clients. So if you're at school, they want to meet the kid whose scholarship they're paying for. If you're us, they want to meet the client that we're helping out. So those things are just tremendous ways to get your people involved and to learn what's going on and take them out. For us, I will pick up a donor and take them out and deliver meals with them to show them, just to meet clients. They can pick where we go. Doesn't matter. And that makes a huge difference to the donors.
Yeah. This is great. This is great information, guys. Here again is the contact information for Life Care Alliance and St. Joseph's Neighborhood Center. If I had thought of the name, or Lunch with Chuck and Joel would have been pretty good for this webinar. But we'll leave that to the creative people. Thanks again Joel, and Chuck for your time today. And thanks again for a really successful little webinar we've put on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This was terrific. Thank you.
Great to hear. And thank you everyone for attending, and we'll be in touch soon. Bye-bye.